Hello, everyone out there online. Bueller. How you doing? I'm doing very well. For those of you out there online right now, just want to let you guys all know that we're going to be getting started here in just a minute. People are grabbing their sandwiches, grabbing their drinks and stuff like that. So just give us 1 or 2 more minutes. We'll be getting started literally in 1 minute. Thank you so much for joining our lunch and learn. We always like when you guys show up in person, so I appreciate the ones out there online. But in person is always going to be better. You get to at least network and ask real questions to the attorneys and stuff we have presenting the class. So deal pitching is much easier when you're here in person. One second, guys. Look at this guy, looking sharp. I see all 20 of you out there online. That's impressive. We have 75 people in the classroom. See, that's why you guys should have showed up. Isn't that right, y'all? All right. One more second, guys. Anyone else out there in the thing? Otherwise, I'm just going to get started so that way we're not wasting the people's time online. Okay. So thank you so much. As of right now, guys, Carl, just so you know, we have, and you'd have to ask Victor, but there's about 20 people online right now as well. So we have more people online than here in person. Guys, make sure you are using this class as an open-ended platform, right? Myself, the speaker, we're going to be in here. We're going to answer any questions you guys have as we kind of go through this. And I do want to thank you all for joining our Lunch and Learn today. We always try to do other things as well. So on January 24th, we will be doing a live after 5 happy hour. So come on down to the Quest office. It'll be on January 24th, right? And I'm sorry, it's at Kirby Ice House, not here at the Quest office. Use that little QR code you see up there on the screen. The big event that I want to talk about a little bit is the Master of a Tax Avoidance Boot Camp. So this is one of those things that we're going to be doing in March, right before the tax deadline. Why are we doing right before the tax deadline, guys? Is because always people wait till the last minute to do everything. So if you're curious about your previous taxes for the year 2023, or you just want to get good information from qualified CPAs, tax attorneys, real estate investors, etc., make sure you're signing up for this class. It's completely, no, it's not free, but it's completely well worth it. So it's $150, guys. Definitely well worth it. Ignoring all that, I want to talk a little bit about our sponsor today. They were going to come up here, but they're not feeling the best. So our sponsor for today's class is actually Blink Lending. So Blink Lending, for those of you guys who know out there, is I have own currently 3 rental properties. I have about 7 promissory notes and a couple of oil and gas investments. If I put the oil and gas investments to the side, every one of my deals has been funded by Blink Lending. So their team is honestly very knowledgeable. They've been able to help me not just from the private money loans and the hard money loans aspect side, but also for your personal loans for like a personal home, a personal property. They gave me a VA loan, which was really nice. So they just really do understand it. Make sure you reach out to Gabe if you are curious and you need a loan for the state of Texas. Phone number is going to be 713-GO-BLINK or 713-462-5465. All right. So now that we've gone through all that stuff, I want to talk a little bit about There we go. That's your slide, right, Carl? That's your first slide. So I so far just been talking about Quest, but I really wanted to talk a lot about Carl and our presenter coming on up here because I can't endorse anyone being a representative of Quest. I can't tell you, hey, you should work with one person over the other. But what I can tell you is talk about my personal deals and talk about things that I have done. So back in 2018, I went to purchase a brand new rental property and I purchased it underneath my own personal name. And very quickly, I backed out of the contract because I wanted to have it underneath an entity name, right? Anyone understands that you typically want to use an entity for multiple things such as asset protection, hiding your name, etc. And guess who I could talk to? Carl, right? And Carl and his staff, they set me up an LLC, which was very nice. And honestly, it was rather easy for myself. They really do understand it. Well, that property that I'm talking about, I had it as a rental for about a year. Tenants destroyed the house. I mean, absolutely destroyed. So had to go in, and this property, unfortunately, was located in Florida. So what made it even worse is I'm not even there locally to try to help gauge it and maintain it. So guess what happened? As I say, you know what? Let's just sell the house as is. Bring in a good buyer. Buyer comes in, right? They sign the as-is contract. They waive the inspection, right? So anyone knows anything about properties, before you buy a property, you really should realistically consider getting an inspection done. But say, hey, look, we don't want an inspection. We're good. We'll take it as is. For the price, it was a very low-end price when you consider where it was. So it was a 3-bedroom, 2-bath house on about an acre of land for $130 grand. Like, guess what happens, though, about 2 weeks later? They want to sue me strictly because the property did not have heat. I've never even seen the house. I don't know what to do. So I'm sitting here, I'm like, man, I'm freaking out. I call Carl, and I'm like, hey, Carl, I need your services again. And I reach out to him, and guess what? Him and his staff help me out, and we get that situation squashed and dealt with. Ultimately, the thing is I want people to understand that when we bring up someone here, I can't ever endorse them, but there's a reason that I will consistently go back to someone like blank for a loan. There's a reason I consistently use the same attorney for firms, and it's because they understand what they're doing. I have an unfair advantage to everyone else in this room and an unfair advantage to everyone watching online. That's that I get to see everyone's good investments. I get to see everyone's bad investments. I get to see every contractor you guys use, which ones are good, which ones are bad. I get to see all your lenders. I get to see all the paperwork that comes in, those operating agreements and subscription agreements. And there's a reason I steer away from certain people. And I'm going to let you guys know that I have never steered away from Dore Law or Carl and his staff. So with that being said, Carl, I'm going to kind of let you come up here and talk about your topic for today. So everyone give him a big round of applause. It's all yours, Carl. Is that too much? He's like, oh, I don't know.
As much. All right. This is working pretty good for. Okay, good. All right. My name is Carl Dore, and I'm gonna tone that down a little bit. One of the easy things that Derek was able to find us is because for about 15 years, my office was across the hall. So between Quincy's group and us, we had the entire first floor of this building, and we just recently moved down the road. We can walk to our offices, but we needed to expand, and so did Quest. So we kind of figured that was a good time to do it. All right, I did want to. Now there is also, besides me, there are some really, really good lawyers that have come through some of these sessions and seminars, some of these speaking things. In at least 3 instances, I know the people very well because they worked for my firm, and then they've gone on their own, and now they've also figured out that this is a good spot to come visit with folks and help them understand real estate issues. I have a couple of lawyers here that also from my firm that I want to introduce. Connor Smith is in the back. Stick your hand up. And Erica Veal. And Crystal is our marketing person. And so she has a mug. Oh, you can have one. It's a freebie that if you want a mug, everybody does those Arctic and the what's that other one? Yeah. Those things that they're kind of cool, but everybody does that. So we want to do something a little different. And you can drop this one, and it won't mess up. So your kids can do it. The agenda today. Let me see if I can make sure I'm doing this right. The topic is the back to basics. That was kind of boring. So I went to Rocky and Bullwinkle, and for those that still remember that topic is you know what you should have done, but you didn't do it, and now you got to fess up to your spouse about, oh my gosh, what did I do? So is it this click here? Yeah, nope. Yeah, so this is the agenda. They said I can do any topic I wanted. So I said, let me pick the kind of the same self-directed IRA problems that we see kind of recurring and way too often. How can you prevent them? What can you do about it? Because you got to know it's repeat after me, self-directed IRA. You decide, not Quest. You got to look at what's the deal, what's the terms, how are they doing it. Due diligence is your absolute thing. And it is an investment, not the investment. Don't be the person who says, I had X amount of dollars and I put it all in. This is in the investment pyramid. Even Derek will tell you, this is the cherry at the top. So you want to be careful of that. But it's 2023 and it's time to do it the right way. And this isn't right. My slide doesn't have P. Diddy doing his thing here. That was the best part. So anyway, but here's some potentials if you just decide that I'm not going to listen to any of these speakers at Quest and I'm just going to do it myself and wing it. Potentially it's the loss of your investment. Potentially it's the loss of your entire IRA treatment. So you really don't want that. Sometimes you find out, oh my gosh, I got an unsecured note. Like I just had a question pop up 15 minutes ago. Or now it messed up and I got to now go find an attorney. Where do I find one? And how do I do that? Do I ask my friends and neighbors? They're the ones who told me about this deal I just got in. It's a horrible waste of time and energy when you got to deal with the one that doesn't work. The worst part from the legal perspective is that if it goes to litigation, which you really want to avoid, then sometimes all your personal records and junk becomes open because that's part of the discovery process. Don't let it. And if it's really bad, then you have to go get one of those no value asset opinion letters. And it's almost always an attorney to do them. We do those. There's some other attorneys that do them. But that's the worst thing. But you got to do it to stop the bleeding of your own, IRA. You don't want the money to keep coming out of there. So you can do that. And then really, here's the worst part. You got to go fess up. It's just bad. So the real thing we want to talk about is how to avoid that. And see this one again, we got this cool singer right here. She's supposed to be dancing right there. Anyway, did I do my due diligence? So here's what we're going to do. Talk a little bit about the basic due diligence. And I can't tell you how many times I talk to folks. Did you go out and look at that house? Huh? They didn't even go look at it. They didn't go see where it is. What's the area around it, the community? They're going to do a rehab and a flip. They don't even, what is the potential? And then go find out. And if they're not going to go, maybe it's in Florida. Hire somebody and get somebody to go out there and just check it out. You can pull a copy of the general warranty deed from the real property records. It's a free search. Go online. Almost all counties these days, you can pull the general warranty deeds, at least look at it. Sometimes you want to get a copy, then you have to pay for the copy, but it's not very expensive. But check it out. What is that going to tell you? The value of the property sometimes. General warranty deed doesn't always have property. It might say $10 another good and valuable consideration. But the HCAD will, or the Matagorda CAD, wherever you're looking at that piece of property, you can look at that and see what the appraisal values. What else can the general warranty deed tell you? This is discussion time. Y'all know Quincy loves this part. Previous owners, exactly. And you can even go beyond that. That's right. The other thing to me, that's exactly right. But sometimes I want to see, okay, how many investors you have in this thing, because you want to know who are the other investors, right? They're not going to tell you. So see, is there a lien that's granted to those new investors? Are they granting liens? How is doing it? Okay, that's good. I was wanting to make sure we had some stuff. What else can appraisal district records tell you? Anything? Sizes. You can see how much land is involved, square footage, property that's in the building, any outlying buildings, stuff like that, all kinds of stuff. Other things you can do in your basic due diligence, go check with somebody. You'd be surprised how inexpensive it is to have an attorney review the earnest money contract, or the 1 to 4 family real estate contract is what they call it. If it's supposed to be, and I hope you're looking at a secured investment, make sure the documents are in place, and ask all of your questions. So, and if you want to be secured, what do you mean secured? 3 basic documents you got to have. Now, when you bought your house, you probably went into the title company and you had a stack of documents that high, and most of them said the same thing over and over if you really looked at it. A private transaction, you don't necessarily do that. You might not even do a title company, although it's usually recommended to everybody, even you online people, everybody, try to do a title company. But these are the 3 basic documents. Those are the 3 things that you got to have. Which 2 of the 3 are recorded? Anybody? General warranty deed and the warranty deed of vendor's lien. That lien is the lender. The vendor is the lender in Texas. Other places, other states, it'll be just a security agreement of some sort. Promissory note is not recorded. What is more important for you guys when you're looking at these things? Sometimes promissory note. So well, that's not showing up all that good, but we're learning. We tried some new stuff on our slides here. I usually like dark blue and yellow to pop, but there's this. Examples of bad promissory notes is stuff like this. The names are not accurate. The signatures aren't valid. It's a corporate borrower, but they sign without their corporate capacity. Then you have a question. Is that an individual borrower or is it really a corporate borrower? Did the payments amounts match? Are the interest rates on there? Is there a default interest rate? You don't necessarily have to have that, but it's also your good, your hammer, because you got an interest rate, and if they default, then you have a little step up in interest rate. That also happens. What happens if the note goes delinquent and it goes past the statute of limitations? What is statute of limitations? In Texas, the general statute of limitations is the time period at which you can bring a lawsuit. It's 4 years for a breach of contract. So there are certain things that are shorter, 2 years, 1 year, certain things you can never go beyond. But 4 years is the typical statute of limitations, at which point a promissory note is a contract. Somebody defaults. At that point, when is your last time to stop negotiation and go sue them? That's what you got to know. And if they fail to make payments, what are your remedies? Do you have any others? You can put all of that stuff in your contract. Are you holding the original note? It's a lot easier if you're holding the note. You can prove it up if you lost it, but it's harder. But one of the easiest cases in Texas, believe it or not, is a suit on a promissory note. 2 elements. Who's the holder of the note? Hopefully that's you. What's the remaining balance? Prove those 2s up, and that's your claim. So you have remedies even if you don't have security, if you don't have collateral. So you're not out of the water. It's just some changes. The other thing is changes that occur over time. And does your amendment fit all the terms of a contract? This is what makes a valid promissory note. Basic stuff. Date of the loan, dollar amounts. Oh, these slides are going to be available, by the way. I'm not sure how Quest does it, but whenever I do these things, we just leave them and you can download them later. But you can take all the notes you want. Names of all the parties. You don't have to have signatures of both parties. Not in Texas. You do in some states. Depends where you are. Interest amounts, collateral involved. You have to do the collateral if you're going to be holding a security against that collateral. And timeline. Here's a note that I found from 1903. It works. I wouldn't recommend it. It's certainly not a secured note, but it is a note. And you can use something like this. And you know how I found it? I was preparing these slides. And so I Googled free promissory note GIF. And this thing pops up. Well, okay, there you go. But that's what it is. It's like any other contract. Put your stuff in there. Yeah. I'm not sure that was the John Kennedy. And I'm not sure that was the Eastman Kodak, Charles Eastman. But and there you go. Okay, now, what happens though? You did all this stuff. You knew you weren't supposed to do it this way, and you're still going to litigation. What could go wrong? So I thought I'd pull some of the facts of one that was related to a lender who came through the Quest concept. It's all public record. We did not handle the litigation, but we did handle the research to find out the problems. And here's what we found out in the due diligence is that the guy that was the borrower had a fictitious name, and he had a couple of prior bankruptcies, and he held a meeting. These facts are all public record, and you can look it up yourself. I'm not going to tell you the names. It was a horrible situation, but it's still not completely done. And at this meeting, there was one other person, and the other person purported to be an investor who I was going to put in $300,000 or whatever the number was. And you better hurry because you've got more people in. Y'all know the red flags to watch out for. And if you don't, go see an accountant or an attorney and check it out in advance. It gets better. The borrower had some fake credentials, including some college degrees from Stanford and somewhere else, Berkeley, I can't remember. And the borrower made the note documents, and they weren't very good. He signed a few of them, but not in the right capacity and with the fake name. And the collateral wasn't listed. So that could have been an easy due diligence check by looking at the previous general warranty deed. Does it get better? You say, oh, yeah. When they start questioning, how come there's a default and you're not paying me back and putting the money back, and said, well, the property hadn't sold yet. We're marketing everything. None of that was part of the requirements. There were no requirements to sell or market or anything. Those were contingencies, not part of the deal. That part was good. And then the borrower moves in the property. Oh, yeah. So then the litigation was filed. Turns out the discovery, my firm did not do this particular litigation. So I really feel more comfortable talking about it because I just pulled the petition and the judgment. But what they found was that there was a whole bunch of transfers between intercompanies. None of that was permissible. So ultimately there was a judgment in favor of the borrower. Fraud in a real estate transaction, all kinds of stuff, individual judgments against the guy and all of his companies, $600,000 in damages plus attorney fees. And the latest that I saw was there was a turnover effort. What that is when after you get the judgment, you petition the court to say, Judge, I hadn't been paid yet. I want the ability to have a receiver take over all of their assets, their post office department, every mail that comes in. One we did one time, we had a receiver took over the box seats for the Rangers games and all the tickets, so we were able to resell them. Not unrelated to a real estate deal. That was a oil and gas litigation. That's what could go wrong. You don't want to do it. So here is a flow chart of, this is the start. The guy's a fictitious name. Here's all the way to the end of the judgment. At what point can you stop and say, no, wait a minute. I'm not going any further. So that's the flow chart, because here is the biggest deal. There's other projects. I thought that was a great quote. So I thought you might like that one. There's lots of them. Pick the right ones. Do your due diligence. So, you know what, wait a minute. Did I skip something? Maybe I was having too much fun. Okay. So here's where any questions on any of these aspects? You know what? I did have some more. Yeah, here's what it was. I did have some more due diligence questions that I recommend you could use, but let's do that question. Hold on a second for the online people. Does this thing, it does work automatic? Okay, y'all know how to work this thing? You just throw it to the next person. Right.
Lend money to somebody, he's making material, and I only have a promissory note, he signed it. But what happened, he bankrupt and went back country.
He went bankrupt and moved to another country, but he's still the lender.
Yes.
Does he have any assets in the U.S. and domestically?
His house, his one house that he
Okay.
was living in.
In Texas?
Texas, yes.
Okay. Residential
Residential.
houses in Texas is one of the most protected items.
But they are not there.
Yeah,
they
It's
left
one of the most
country.
protected items. If that is his home and he's planning on coming back, that's very difficult
Mhm.
to attach to that home.
I see.
There are a few rarities that can. Years ago, I did have one that we were able to get a constructive trust because a guy took money
Mhm.
that he was supposed to use for investors for a particular purpose, and he used it to buy a house in Lakeway in Austin. We got a constructive trust on the house, and he was required to sell it within 2 years.
Mhm.
That's difficult.
Right.
So is your note secured by any other property?
No.
It's
This-
unsecured
this-
note.
this
You
was
may,
signed up, just
your
like the
only
document was
recourse
signed.
is likely litigation,
Yeah.
get a judgment, and figure out other ways to find recovery. That's not a good situation to be.
No.
Not a good situation to be.
How
Actually,
should I protect it?
so that's,
Should
but we
I
can
relate-
visit with you later
Sure, definitely.
after. That'd be great. And there was
Sure.
another question. Did you have one?
When you purchase a property and you
Yeah, for the online folks.
when you purchase a property like a rental house and you want to put it in a trust,
Hmm.
like does it have to be all cash? If not, the owner would still say the bank.
Does not have to be all cash. You can do, one of the beauties with self-directed IRAs is you can do multiple types of transactions. If we have time, I brought some stuff because one of the latest issues is the checkbook IRA. Use a limited liability company doing that. And I'm going to tell you pros and cons. That is one of the aspects you can use as a vehicle. But if you want to use a trust, perfectly fine. Depends. There are some prohibitions, and you probably know all that part already, right? The prohibitions regarding how much authority you can have over your self-directed IRA versus your, okay. Some of those are going to come into play. There's no prevention from doing what you're talking about doing, so long as you follow all the qualifications that the IRS sets up. Does that help?
Yes. Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions before we move on? Okay. What I wanted to do is two things. One is I want to go over some due diligence questions that are not common, but things that I have used on multiple not the same transaction. They're all a little different. But when you're doing your due diligence, I think you should ask every question you can possibly think of to make yourself be comfortable. So I pulled some that I've looked at for lots of stuff, and none of them in order. And these are not necessarily on our slides. But one is to go check the borrower's corporate structure. Is his company still listed as active with the Secretary of State? You can do a free search on the Comptroller's office. You can call the Secretary of State, and they'll tell you. If it's not in good standing, that could be a problem. I think you should check the litigation history, not only of the company, but also of the individual principal running that company, and check it out. See if there's any lawsuits and stuff going on. Check with HCAD if it's in Harris County or where we are. Any other assets owned by this company or this individual? What else is out there? If there's several, then you know, okay, hey, things seem to be moving, and you can ask that. Other questions I ask is, what's your intention to give status report on this investment? How's it going to work? How often do you do status reports? Are the properties that you have all owned by the same LLC or corporation, or however they do it? And if it is it the same members? So if it should be, if it is, but I've other symptoms. How are your different properties handled? How are your different accounts handled? Is there any commingling of money going on? Is there commingling of accounts on any aspect with your other investors? Because you're not going to want that. If there's a problem, you got to untangle all of that stuff. How can you get an accounting of what's going on with the property? An accounting for any of the rehab work? What's going on? What's the cost? Did you get 3 bids for the new roof? You know, just typical stuff. I ask it like this: when can I typically receive the bank statements that goes on for this project. Not, will I be able to get the no. It's like when you ask your kid, what college are you going to go to when you get old enough? You don't ask him, is he going to go, right? You just assume that. When can I receive bank statements, typically? What's the timing of the projected sale if it's an acquisition of a house to rehab and flip? What's the timing of it? How are you looking at that? Have you talked to any realtors? How are you going to sell it? What's the timing on the rehab? Has it started? You've already started? And you're just now asking for money? Wait a minute. Who was the first investors? And was there some additional costs going on? Do they have a first lien? Okay, you can ask all those kinds of questions. Ask them to provide copies of all of the closing documents of how they got the property and include the title commitment. Many times, oh, by the way, I forgot that. No, I want to see the title commitment. Where can I get a list of the other investors? Oh, they don't want to give you that, right? Hardly ever. How can you go get it otherwise? We just talked about it. Go to real property records. Is there any liens, deeds of trust granted by that borrower to other investors, other people? There you pull their names, have their addresses, give them a call, figure out what it was. Ask them, who's going to prepare the documents to protect your investors? Who's preparing the promissory note? Who's preparing the deed of trust? Who's doing that stuff? Is it them? Okay, where'd they get those forms? Did they Google it? Did they get it from LegalZoom? Caution, red flags, Will Robinson. Just make sure, yeah, you could see that visual, and it's a perfect visual, right? What's your history regarding repayments to investors? Ask all of those questions. Some of these I just made up. Here's a good one. Are there any other investor notes that were unsecured, are missing documents, are not complete, are matured but not paid? You want to hear that one again? Because it came from a case. Are there any other investor notes that were unsecured, that were not paid, that are missing documents, not complete, or matured but not paid? The case in the matter of Equity Trust Company, Securities and Exchange Commission, Washington, 2017. And it was a horribly bad, scary case for companies like Quest Trust. What did it mean when they say self-directed IRA, right? So, if you need some.
Sorry, yes, there's a question from the chat. It is actually along those lines. If our self-directed IRA owns a rental property, do we need to worry about asset protection? If so, how do we protect that property, that asset?
Do they have an idea of what their response would be? Before I give an answer, I'd like to know. Anybody else want to take an idea?
I'll give an answer.
I know I have an answer too. This is a good chance to, you're faced with that. How do I have asset protection for my asset, basically? How can it be protected doubly, other than a note, other than a lien, right? Insurance? Anybody use insurance?
Insurance? What's that?
That's kind of.
Hazard insurance and liability.
Yeah, I would definitely do that. You can get insurance for everything, just about. In fact, it might be a question to ask your borrower: do you have E&O insurance? Because that doesn't protect him. That's to protect his investors. It might be worth it. Yeah. Did you have what other ideas you have?
Well,
Insurance is the easiest one, I thought.
yeah. So I think I know what the client's getting at. So test. Okay, this is working.
Okay, good.
Just like an LLC, every single IRA does have its own level of asset protection. All right. But that asset protection typically comes from things like creditors. Right. So if I file for bankruptcy or something like that, they can't, the credit agency can't go after anything in my retirement account. Now, let's say I do have a property in my IRA and I'm holding it and I'm a negligent homeowner, right? I'm a negligent landlord. And something does happen, and so the tenant does want to sue me. Typically, and correct me if I'm wrong, you can't pierce that veil of the IRA. we do recommend a lot of times to clients to set up multiple IRAs if they're going to be having multiple rental properties. Now, when I say typically pierce that veil, and Carl, I would assume that almost every attorney out there would probably say, hey, look, there's always going to be that case where something can happen, right? If you really are just being negligent, I guess, as a homeowner. Is that a safe assumption? That
is a safe assumption. So is the questioner, are they more interested in how to protect themselves, their personal liability against that property?
At least that's how I took the question was,
Okay,
hey, they're more curious on like, hey, if my IRA owns this property and the
Okay,
tenant sues me, am I still protected?
Right.
And I would say typically yes, just
Yes.
because of that pierce the veil aspect. However, there's plenty of cases out there where someone or a landlord was very negligent purposely. I mean, a judge is not going to take that kindly.
No, and there's another way you can do it is we're going to go into in just a minute, and that's use of a limited liability company, because that is also a fantastic way to avoid personal protection, or personal liability and personal exposure. One of the greatest inventions for the creation of personal wealth was the corporation years and years ago, because you can take risks in a corporation that you might not want to do personally. Corporations, LLCs in Texas, most states are the same. Limited partnerships all have the same protections on personal liability, and it's a good one. The only thing it can't protect for is if you lie, cheat, steal, fraud. You commit those kinds of crimes, you're not going to be protected. Enron, when the debacle happened, the individuals were sued because the company didn't do the crime. Those individual people did. So you just don't do that and you'll be fine. If there's more, was there any more to that question?
Yes, there's a couple more.
Okay.
One of them,
Oh
yes,
boy.
one of them says, please expand on low value investment opinion letters.
You know what? I'm going to do this one with Derek because there's two aspects of this. We often get a request that the asset has no value, and how do I write off an asset to help my tax liability position? What we do, and that's going to be questions that come through your Quest representatives and your accountants. What we handle is once we get that question, what do we do with it? We do an asset search, an evaluation to determine, is there any potential recovery? You're saying it's no value. Why? What's the deal? We've had situations where companies go bankrupt and then there's no value to an asset at all. At that point, we can write in a letter as an opinion, and it's filed with Quest or whichever trust company you're using, and they can use that to do their thing. Now, tell us your thing.
I would say most of the time when someone says, hey, I did an investment with my retirement account, the investment went bad, so it has zero value to it. I would disagree with that statement most of the time. The reason why is typically you invest in something tangible. You can touch it, feel it, see it, look at it. The reason you consider it a zero value is you don't want to spend the time, energy, and effort to go after what that value might be, and you're willing to cut your losses. So with that being said, I think that's the better question is, can it be devalued by someone like Carl or his team? Absolutely. But most of the time, someone's going to try to say, well, is there still value there? Right? Or is it you just don't want to chase the value? And I think that's the better question.
I think it probably is. And one of the ways to look at it is if you have collateral, if you've done it properly, what is the value of that collateral? Can I foreclose? Can I take it over and turn it into something? It may not be worth 100 cents on the dollar because you got to spend some time and effort to do the foreclosure. But then once you do it and take charge of your life again, then you can sell it, market it, do whatever you want, and you will have a recovery of some aspect. There have been instances, they're a little more rare, if we have a zero value, that later at some point there's a recovery. You can always take the money and undo that portion of it. Okay, does that help? Okay. A couple of other ideas on the due diligence items. Google it. You want to know some due diligence questions? Go Google it. I did to see if there was really any. There was a ton. And then as you're getting ready, make yourself a checklist to make sure you get all of your questions answered as you're going through. All right, I had a little bit. Yes.
You mentioned something about.
Wait, hold on, Susan. Hold on. People online can hear your question.
You
Yeah.
mentioned something about. I don't know if I wrote this down right. Checking their litigation record or something when you're doing due diligence on an entity. If I'm
Yeah.
going to loan to an entity,
Right.
and they're buying something, check. You mentioned check the Secretary of State, and then you said after that.
Check litigation history
Yeah,
and see how to do that.
How do I check litigation?
There's a couple of ways. You can drive downtown and look on the data on the computers down on the courthouse. Attorneys have, you can register for a free search as an attorney to just look up a company or individuals. Is there any litigation? What's the history? Any judgments? The one that I described a few minutes ago about what could happen if you're in litigation. Yesterday, I just pulled up the petition to see what the status of the case is, and I saw the turnover order. There's a brand new search that the State Bar of Texas had gone through a lot of work to try to get it in set up. You have to register in advance. I think it's the research text. Is it only attorneys? Do you know? I'm not. I think it. I don't really know, but it's research text, and it allows you to do a search on all counties in Texas at one time. It is a fee-based service. I think our search is free. I think we have an amount based on number of lawyers, but it's not really expensive. And then we pay for any documents we pull up. But for example, we were having trouble with a particular company not long ago, so we did a search to see, what's out there. And then what we found is about 6 lawsuits that told, and we could see the status of their suits. So at that point, we knew where everybody else was in the hierarchy of litigation effort. So we immediately filed our lawsuit. As soon as they filed the answer, we filed a motion for summary judgment. And we tried to get ahead of all that other litigation. It got us paid. Then we had some more lawsuits later with some other clients, but it is one way to check.
Can I ask you a loaded question, Carl?
We don't take loaded. Yeah.
Can I just pay your firm to look it up for me?
Oh yeah, of course. Yeah,
Yeah.
I guess
I
that
think that's a
would've
better
been-
option. That's what I
I
do.
should have said that just right up, of course. And it wouldn't be me. It would be one of our paralegals who are super duper and better at research than me. Kitty.
Quick question, can they seal the final judgment?
Yes, but it's pretty rare in real estate transactions. You can also seal the discovery requests if there's personal data and stuff. I talked about that a minute ago. You don't want your personal data up there. So they will, you can redact social security numbers and all those kinds of things. We've had that for decades. But you can also request discovery for court's eyes only, under confidentiality. We see that a lot more in bankruptcy really than state litigation, but you certainly can request it. Usually the judges will say, well, why? Tell them why.
So we have another question online, and I hope we're not getting. Are we too far off topic right now, Carl? For you?
No.
Are we doing okay? All right.
No.
So
We'll probably be on the basics, but I kind of had hoped to be, and I had kind of hoped to say, let's look at the basics because it's 2023, and so now how can we fix some of the others, right?
So I do like this question because I would consider it kind of a basic question, but they worded it uniquely, and they asked like, "Hey, how do I get note insurance?" And I would say it's not necessarily note insurance,
Yeah.
But so when someone's asking like, "Hey, how can I get insurance for my note?" And I would label it as title insurance, but
We had the Blink Lending was here. They still.
yep, they just had to go.
Ah, shit.
Yeah, that's
That
all
would
right.
have been a great question to say, hey, wait a minute, you're the sponsor. You answer that question. I don't know about note insurance, but I suspect there is something like that because I know that there is an account receivable insurance out there now. So you'll see big companies that will have insurance on their AR coming in. You see it really big in the oil field services companies today because none of them trust their oil company customers. And so we have seen that as a progression probably in the last 10 years, but super accelerated in the last 5 because we've had a couple of down cycles in the last 5. So I don't know about note insurance. Do you know much
No,
about it?
so the way I'm thinking of your question on the note insurance side is more how can I make sure I have insurance to secure my investment? Now, when I'm doing loans, I'm lending with my note being secured by property. So I have title insurance that is going to say, hey, that title insurance says I have this lien position, I have first rights or whatever it might be. And so I think that's really what you're asking as far as instead of just note insurance directly. And that's at least how I took it. But
Okay. I hope that helps.
yeah,
But in a
I
minute,
could be wrong.
in a minute, I'm going to have my email address up here on the slides, and y'all can write that down. So we have about 15 minutes. Let me do something here right quick. I'm going to do 5 minutes on something that we've been getting a lot of questions about, and then let's go back to Q&A. Y'all want to do that? Okay. The one we've been getting a lot of calls about is a relatively new, not brand new, but relatively new thing on the checkbook IRA. So there's some pros and cons. Are y'all familiar? Have you heard about that? It's setting up a limited liability company with a checkbook. And that's, instead of coming to Quest to say, give me some money and move it to this thing, you use your checkbook. A little scary, right? Okay, I'm going to give you the pros and cons. The pros is that your SDIRA, your account, can invest in a single member LLC. There were some questions about could that happen. There's a recent case that allowed that to be, that the IRS said, yes, that is exactly right. It can be done that. Then the owner of the IRA, meaning you, can have checkbook control over your own funds. You still have some other criteria. I'm going to get to that in a minute, but it allows you to really go into transactions quickly without a lot of oversight. I'm not sure how much you don't want that, but that's what it is. The case was McNulty versus Commissioner of Internal Revenue. You can Google that. You can just Google that style of that case, and you will get what they said. The most important thing is that IRA owners cannot have unfettered command over your IRA assets. How many times have you heard Quincy or Nathan or Derek or any other speaker stand up here and not say that? I mean, that's all they do, right? So the member is like a shareholder of a corporation, but the member of the IRA, of the LLC, is your IRA, is your FBO, Quest Trust FBOU, whatever. Okay? You can, and it's usually described just like it, I'll put it up here. The manager, which is like a director of a corporation, the manager is a different person than the owner of the IRA. So who would you pick? You can't pick your spouse, your kids, your mom or your dad. You can pick somebody outside your nuclear family. I've seen sisters. More commonly, it's you know how you see little cliques that grow up in the Quest world, and because they start trusting each other and they do multiple deals and they know what they can expect from each other. Many times we'll see other business partners. Here are some reasons why to avoid this structure. All right. Some of the things is that it is a ton of traps if you're not handling yourself correctly. The initial setup of the LLC is the easy part. We have changed our company agreement, which is like the bylaws of what used to be called bylaws, but we changed our company agreement to satisfy the IRS requirements because they're a little more specific than just the normal stuff. The problem, though, is what happens when the IRA owner starts making the decisions and they're not really checking with the people who really can tell them what can you do. The rules are kind of complex. You have to know, you got to be careful. That's what it is. It's allowable for now based on the McNulty case, but no one is predicting it's going to be allowable forever. By the way, you can go Google checkbook IRA LLC and you'll see some stuff from Oregon, from Virginia, I think. And lots of people are saying this is the greatest thing next, yeah. So, but I know you're probably still thinking about it, and I have not convinced you to watch out. So here's some more that you have to do. The LLC is owned by the IRA, period. That's who owns your LLC. It's going to be the FBO, blah, blah, blah. You can't get a salary. The LLC can't say, oh my gosh, hey, look, I'm my own employee. You can't do that stuff. If you do a prohibited transaction, because you're making your own decisions, right? You could put at risk your entire IRA, and you just don't want to do that. You can't invest in certain kinds of things, and those are going to be like gold bullions or other things that are prohibited transactions that you probably already heard over and over again. Derek has the microphone. You're looking like you want to say something. Okay, good. Okay. Okay. What happens if the IRA owner dies or becomes disabled or any of the there's typically 5 triggering events that we put in buy-sell agreements, and most attorneys do. What happens if those things happen? You have to have that set up in your company agreement, or like bylaws. There are some other strict prohibitions, and it's going to be the same kinds of ones that you already know about. You can't personally guarantee stuff, but you can't do that anyway in your IRA. And there's the last one. I'm not going to read that whole thing, but that's what it is. So, and I know you're probably still thinking, wait a minute. We do them. A lot of attorneys do them. Do not do these with LegalZoom. Just don't. You're gonna set yourself up for a real problem. I don't know of no lawyer who would recommend this kind of a concept with a LegalZoom. It's just not set up for that. They can't handle that. That's the end. But this was my favorite slide. One of our other lawyers who's a guru and loves his PowerPoint put this one, and so you got these he goes boom. It was kind of cool. So I hope it was free. I don't know. If not, it's going to be online.
It's online right now. So those of you online, if you have more questions, please bring them up.
There's all of my contact information. Okay, we got a few more minutes for any of the last questions, unless you had a.
Well, I did want to make one comment.
Yeah,
I want to make a couple of comments on that. On your previous slide you're just talking about on the checkbook control is last year I got the privilege to speak in front of Congress every quarter, right? And what's unique about it is I don't speak at Congress for Quest. I actually I am now the representative on a government relations committee for all retirement companies to give my 2 cents on what this means. So it's actually really unique. And Congress is looking at these checkbook control accounts more and more and more. You can see this with the most recent bill that passed on December 26, being the Secure Act 2.0. And if you want to look it up, Section 322 strictly talks about prohibited transactions and how it's going to be targeting checkbook control accounts. And so if you want more information, I'll be teaching a class on that next week, but just be very, very careful. Make sure you're using a good, competent attorney. And checkbook control is not a legal term. It is a marketing term. Because of that, when you Google it and you look online, you get so many articles that are based off opinion, not based off fact. And so just be very careful with that. That's all.
I hope I said that the same way. It is tough. But if you Google checkbook IRA LLC, that's not even a term. But that's the Google term that you will get everything you want to know and more. And it's going to be as if you're sitting in a room and there's another guy that says, I'm fixing to put $300,000. And if you don't hurry up and do it, because it's really, really good. So Will Robinson, I hope the red flags are going up. Any other questions before we end? Yes, sir.
Follow up with your last comment there about.
Hold on, let me run the mic to you.
Oh, yeah.
Just to follow up with your last comment of people kind of rushing through the process. When in your experience, I'm sure you see this every day where or red flags everywhere.
And we don't see the good ones.
Right.
It just does not in our world.
In your experience though, and maybe this is just kind of for the whole group. How frequently do you see that somebody, maybe they just haven't renewed their LLC, and that's why that red flag occurred whenever you did the due diligence and you found that they weren't, up to date on that, or
Good question.
I guess in a hot market, when if you don't act now, it might not be there tomorrow.
Right.
And so many times the seller might see an easier route if I just talk to this other person who doesn't have all of these contingencies and doesn't want to have me cross all these T's and dot all these I's. I would rather sell to this guy. This guy looks like he's going to be a hard person to convince. Let me just go over here.
It's already your first red flag, right? The answer is it's fairly rare. I don't see it that often. A couple of times a year, maybe, when somebody's saying, would you look at this? I'm thinking about doing this investment, and here's the company. Very rare. I'll tell you when it's more common. It's when a new company client calls in, often oilfield services companies or big companies, and they'll call in. And so we'll say, hey, let's check out our prospective new client. And we'll go, your corporate status has lapsed. Did you know that? And they hardly ever do, because they get busy. I'll tell you the most common reason why they overdo. They forgot to file their public information report. It's very innocuous. So many times that's all it is. The public information report is one that goes to the Texas Comptroller, and it says, this is how much franchise taxes I owe. And if they owe none, they still have to file the form and put zeros. Now, little known fact is Secretary of State loves that, because if they didn't file it, then it costs $75 tax to reinstate your company. It's a pain. So that's about it. So it's not that common. But when we do, it usually leads to my next question, which is, well, then who's the principal? And should I really look at the litigation history of the company and the principal? So that's more like what I do. And it is one of my first checks, by the way, because it's free. It's fast. It's online. I don't know the Texas Comptroller. You Google Texas Comptroller, you'll get a link that you just click it in, and then it'll say, are you a real person? Click, and it'll tell you, is it in good standing? When was the company formed? And then who are the officers? You can get all of that data. That's actually a longer answer but that was a really good question that seems kind of simple, but it's a good check. Anything else?
Just can I make one little comment? And I'm sorry, but I would say that normally when we see people make a lot of mistakes, like what you're kind of mentioning and stuff like that, it comes down to fear of loss, right? And if you're investing because you're afraid you're not going to get something or get the next thing, you said it very early on, Carl, there's always another one. The minute you start investing out of fear because you're afraid you're going to lose something, that's where you'll make a mistake. I'm not saying every single time that's going to happen, but it's that fear trigger, and that's what people prey on. That's what the person who is raising capital, that's what the borrower, that's what they are preying on, your fear of, hey, if you don't do it now, I'm going someplace else. Great, go someplace else.
Y'all saw this just last year. Look at the prices of houses. If we don't get this thing.
If you don't make an offer now, then the next offer.
And I go, I can't sell my house. Where am I going to move? Because I can't afford that. Well, you should have, because then now you can buy a dirt cheap house. No, there's always another bus. That's a good question. A good comment. Were we going to do, yeah, did you?
Yeah, but
okay.
One or two more questions.
Oh, okay, good. I just want to infringe on that.
Worst case scenario in litigation, no assets, you can't recover. It has more tendencies to fraud. Have you ever recommended that your client go talk to the district attorney?
Yes, I have. Some counties are better than others. Harris County is very difficult to get the DA's office to take a case. They will almost always tell you that it's a civil problem. Go sue them. We got bigger problems. We got murders and drug deals, and they're lazy. If you keep pushing on them, they'll usually do something. The other answer is sometimes to just go forward and take that judgment. A judgment lasts 10 years, and you can follow along and watch is there any other assets that might pop up with this individual or this company that might deal? And then when it gets close to the 10 years, you can reinstate that judgment for another 10 years and again and indefinitely. So yeah, it's, we don't like those that languish forever. But more commonly in litigation, you reach the point that you push to a mediation. Judges will hardly ever let you get to a trial without a mediation. And so you go to mediation, you'll have a third party person that will try to help you work through your resolution. You ever done a mediation? I've done 100. They work really pretty well. And then the parties will try to reach a point that they can get what they can get. And you walk away from money and you can be done. So that's one way. Hope I answered that.
Last question there in the back, and we'll
Yes.
open up to deal pitching.
We have a question from the chat. Do you not recommend checkbook IRA LLC?
Do I not recommend them? I do not recommend them if you are not willing to take the time to learn what it takes on how to do it right. If you want to take that time and you're willing to do so, it could be a pretty good vehicle for you. But by the same token, I'm not going to recommend you go get an online account to make your own stock picks unless you're going to watch it carefully and you understand what you're doing. Otherwise, you're just at the
It's a loaded question.
It's a loaded question. You're not. It's not going to work unless you are willing to do what it takes.
Some
to
people
watch it.
absolutely checkbook control LLCs with IRAs
Yeah.
and stuff are incredible, and we teach a whole class on how to get it properly. Other people, they set it up because they're doing a loan and they want to avoid a $125 fee. Like, what are you doing, man?
Yeah,
You
what
spend
are
as
you
much money just filing the franchise fee on the SS88 form each year.
Yeah.
So
Exactly. That's a difficult question, and I would say to the online question is to check with another attorney, check with an accountant, talk about it, and see if you can, go through and understand exactly what they're doing and why you want to do it. That may be the better approach.
I would always ask them to, right off the bat, why do you want checkbook control? Because if you're telling me you're going to do one investment, maybe two investments or something like that, man, you're buying a semi truck and a Prius is going to do just fine.
Right.
Like, it's the truth.
A one-time deal. Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. It's the
Before you head out, well, give us your phone number and how people can get in contact with you. And so you're going to start off the deal pitching.
I guess I'll start.
Absolutely.
So my name is Carl Dore. Several years ago, I decided that I was seeing so much real estate work that I decided to get board certified in commercial real estate and residential real estate. There's over 100,000 lawyers in Texas. There's only about 120 with those two. And in the west side of town, there's one.
Was that you?
Yeah, isn't that weird? Craziest thing ever. Phone number is 281-829-1555. My email address is Carl, C-A-R-L, @dorelaw.com, D-O-R-E law.com.
Everyone give him a
Pretty
big
simple.
round of applause. Thank you, Carl.
Thanks, guys.
So from there, we're going to definitely open it up fully to deal pitching. Does anyone want to come up here? Take a 30 seconds to a minute. Tell us who you are. If you're raising capital, if you want to mention an event coming up or anything like that, you're welcome to come up and say hello. Steve? Steve's coming. So Steve, who's coming on up here, is actually all the investments I mentioned I had earlier. He has vetted every single one of them, and I do mean every single one of them. So
because we don't want to make sure you don't get in trouble, do the wrong thing.